Welcome to the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast, bringing you the country's top podcast on the subject of internet marketing, with your hosts Glenn Thayer and the CEO of Intuitive Websites, Thomas Young.
You know, Tom and I were talking about social media and SEO and how a lot of companies are putting tons of energy into social media and into search engine optimization. However, I think they're missing the basics. Wouldn't you agree, Tom?
Well, yeah, and especially when companies start putting large investments into social media or SEO, or are so focused on SEO that it drives everything they're doing around their website. It's just really, really important that you have the basics and the fundamentals and the strategy in place first before you start moving toward the driving traffic stage of your web marketing program. And that's really what social media and SEO do for you, is they drive attention to your website and they drive traffic. And so what I thought we should do is look at 10 things to do before social media and SEO, or before large investments are made in social media and SEO.
Oh.
And so I think the first one is to have a very clear and sustainable strategy for your website that mirrors your company's marketing strategy. And I think that those two words are very key to this. And that's number one, is that it's a very clear strategy, so it's understood, and it's sustainable. It's a strategy that's going to be there for some time, because social media and SEO efforts are going to be modified and changed, and they're dynamic and they're changing all the time. But the strategy of your core business that's communicated on your website should be the same and sustainable.
Well, this goes back to a podcast that we did several years ago, and we've done several on those on your marketing plan for your web marketing plan. And This is probably a good time to go dust that off, because I can guarantee probably most people have done it. They put it in their folder and they called it a day. And with all the changes, they're like, well, it must be SEO and social media where I have to focus. I think we need to pull that back out.
That's right. If you look at the content that's put out by our competitors to our business, the vast majority of that content is based on SEO and social media. And I'm not saying those aren't important. Yes, they're very important. What I'm saying is there are things to do before you really dive into that in a lot of detail.
It's like a road trip. You got to have a road map and know where you're going to go before you start bringing everything in.
That's right, and it's a trade. You know, it goes hand in hand with your overall marketing strategy for your company and the marketing strategy for your website. Which, you know, a website is a unique way to market what you do, and that's why you need to have plans for both. So number one is have a clear, sustainable strategy for your website. Number two is to make sure you have clear and measurable conversion points on your website.
Well, let's go back to, for our newer listeners, what exactly is a conversion point?
Well, a conversion point is a place on the website where the user can actually make contact with you. And there's all different forms of contact that can be made, from subscribing to an email to having a comment that they make on your blog, to signing up for a free download or white paper, to inquiring about your services, to actually buying something on an e-commerce site. Those are all conversions because they're interactions with your users. If you don't have measurable conversions, then in your social media strategy, you're not going to be able to measure how someone comes through, say from LinkedIn, clicks through to your website, and then becomes a sales lead or buys something, which is what you want your website to do. And this number two, this clear and measurable conversion points is probably the biggest thing that people miss before they go to social media and SEO. And that it's almost like having something you're going to offer people, but then not being able to take their money when they want to pay you. Oh no, sorry, we can't take your money, but we have everything else that you would possibly want. Well, if you can't have that conversion point, then you're not going to have the interaction or the transaction, which allows the website to drive your business and market your business.
Which tosses us right into number three.
Right, number three, which is, well, it's almost, why should we even say this? But it's very true. The website should be very easy to use and valuable to the target market. So all websites should be easy to use. I think if you listen to these podcasts, you can agree on that. But they also have to be valuable to the target market. They don't have to be valuable for everybody, just the folks that you're targeting. And once again, if your website's not doing that and you're driving all this traffic through social media or spending tons of money on SEO, then you're not going to see the return that you'd like. And, kind of leads into number 4, which is 100% of site visitors should understand what the website is about. And this goes a little bit beyond the target market in that it's the 10 out of 10 rule that we talk about all the time, which is basically anyone that comes to your website should know what you do, what your services or products are about, and be able to buy or purchase from you or refer your website to someone they think would buy or purchase from you. And that's critical because a lot of folks think that, well, why should everyone get our website? We'll make the website so that our target market understands it, and that's fine. Well, we take that a step further. Now, if you're going to go into SEO and social media, why not have 100% of visitors get what you do? That's an important one.
Well, a lot of it, too, is coming back to an age group. I mean, hasn't it been in marketing copy, you want to be able to have a 10-year-old understand what your copy is and understand what you do?
And the deeper you go into consumer markets, then, yeah, that's true. You don't want to put off your target market. Have it be too simple and too basic. You have to find that balance. But it is possible to meet the 10 out of 10 rule, which is basically 10 people on your website would understand what you do and what your company's about.
And you could also do that just on the homepage, too. As far as your landing page is concerned, that can be set up to where it's simple and easy. This is what we do and who we are. And then as you go deeper into the website, then it becomes more detailed for your target market, which obviously goes into number 5.
Yeah, the website should be designed appropriately for the target market. So this is the idea that, somewhere along the line you had a website that was designed by a graphic designer. And if you're going to dive into social media and your website is over-designed or under-designed or not professionally designed or what we see a lot of designed 10 years ago, then that's not going to work. You've got to have the appropriate design first, then start driving traffic.
Well, what's another thing when you have a design? I mean, what would be an appropriate? What is an appropriate design for a target market? Let's just say a real estate agent.
Well, yeah. I mean, every single market segment will have a little different twist on their design. So let's say if you're in real estate or construction, your design needs to be pleasing to consumers, professional looking, and very heavily weighted on photography, right? But if you have an engineering company and you're looking to go after technical folks, then your design is not going to be so focused on photos as much as it is on a professional look and feel and content, driving people into your content. So the design has to be appropriate for the target market.
Well, what about analytics and tracking?
Yeah, so this is number 6, which is set up Google Analytics, test it, make sure it's working right, and then set goals, data goals for Google Analytics. If you don't do this before you set up social media, then you have, once again, no way of tracking the results of what you're getting from social media or SEO. And it's important in Google Analytics, and we've seen this recently, that you test the code to make sure it's working properly, especially if you have an older website that's had different versions of Google Analytics on it or has had different folks putting in Google Analytics in the code and so forth. Test your conversions. We're seeing some interesting data now in Google Analytics around bounce rates and homepage views because of the way that Google Analytics has been set up. And then not only do you want to test it, you also want to set data goals. Now, the nice thing about Google Analytics data goals is that that's not very difficult to do because we know exactly where you should be if you're a lead generation website or e-commerce website as far as your goals. We know that your bounce rate needs to be under 50%. We know that people need to be viewing 4 to 5 pages per visit. And we know that folks need to be on your website for 2 or 3 minutes. And in the new version now of Google Analytics, we can see lots more extensive data like a load time for pages, average time by visitor segment on the website. So all these different types of data can have goals set around them. And they also can become warning flags for where you have potential problems. Like, for example, we have a client recently, we're looking at their homepage load time was 18 seconds.
Wow. And
their bounce rate was 70%. So, we're trying to figure out why is their bounce rate so high? Well, we think we may have just found it. People leave before the page loads. And we were taking this site over from another developer, and we're going to have to go in and resize those graphics because they're too big and they're taking too long to load. And this is a big company website. This is not a small mom and pop. So, we got to do that before we go out and do a social media campaign for them or do a ton of SEO work.
Now, is there also, from an analytics standpoint, are there different analytics for, let's say, a WordPress site than it would be for a typical HTML website?
No, I mean, the Google Analytics and the data will be the same for any website. It's just some of the particulars of how the site is set up will drive some variances in your data. For example, a lot of the WordPress templates and Joomla templates are using pop-up windows to display photos. You click on a photo, that photo gets bigger, and then you can see it. You can see the photo larger. But what's happening when you click on that photo, if it's not set up properly, it's clicking the link to the home page or the home page URL. So then you go look at your home page visits, and they're like 500% more than they've been before. And the reason being is that people are clicking on photos, and it's registering as a visit to the home page. And so that's what it's going to do. It's going to mess up all your stats, because now all of a sudden your bounce rate is like 3%. You're going, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So there's some interesting things that like a WordPress template or a Joomla template can do in Google Analytics. It's probably better to, even if you build a site in HTML, it's going to show better in Google Analytics because you don't have a lot of that functionality. And especially with e-commerce reporting now, with the different types of e-commerce platforms that are out there and so forth, you've got to be on top of that.
Well, what about content for the website?
Yes, so content is critical. We've talked about content before and how important it is for SEO and social media, but let's not forget about content on the website and having a very specific content strategy. This is number 7, is to develop a strong content strategy for your website and really focus on content for products and services. Because here's the bottom line: no matter what you do with SEO or social media, if someone's going to consider buying your products or services, they will be looking at them on your website at some point. If it's e-commerce, they're going to buy from your website. If you're doing a service-based company, they're going to come in and look at you, your team, your history, and all that. So don't forget about the content strategy on your website.
Well, let's talk about that just for a quick second here, because obviously SEO is tied into content, and a lot of folks get in their head that SEO, it has to be tied, it has to be keywords, and it has to be full of keywords, and doesn't that sometimes screw up your content? It
can. SEO not only battles against content, but it can battle against design too. so you've got to balance that out. Now, if you follow the guidelines, we've talked about content in these podcasts before. If you follow those guidelines for content, you'll be fine on the SEO side. And the nice thing about content is that if you stay true to your target market and true to your products and services and have a good volume of content, you're going to be fine in SEO. You won't have a problem.
Well, what about, let's continue with content as opposed to just on the website. What are there other content avenues that can be taken as well?
Well, that ties right to number 8, which is to write a monthly email newsletter and then blog on a regular basis. So before you start posting lots of content to social media or start thinking about your SEO, let's make sure you have a monthly newsletter in place, email newsletter for your target market. It's so inexpensive to do, and you reach so many people. Let's do the newsletter. Let's post it to your website and have an archive there, which is SEO content right there. And then don't forget about blogging. Now, what we're seeing right now, it's April, it's the last day of April 2012. What we're seeing right now is the conflict between, do we even need an email newsletter anymore? We've got our blog, we've got our social media, we've got Twitter. Why do we need to have a newsletter? Well, you do, because people still read email. They still get email, they look at email newsletters, and our rule of thumb is if you have something important to say, you can reach a lot of people very cheaply through email. And so we say have an email newsletter. But the other part of this, too, is that you want to have an RSS feed in your blog so you can send out regular postings that are shorter than an email newsletter, but important, and can go out on the blog and then also be posted to the website and can be posted more frequently than a newsletter, which means you're going to do better on the SEO. And then people then ask, well, what about the Twitter feeds, and what about, LinkedIn and Google Plus and all that? Well, those should be very, very brief snippets, and those snippets can always go back to your blog or your email newsletter. In fact, they really need an anchor. They need something to usually link back to, and that's going to be back to your website. So once again, before you have an extensive social media strategy, you've got to have great website, great content, and these fundamental things.
Now, what about the strategy for social media?
Yes. So before, and this is number 9, before you actually launch your social media, sit down and do a strategy. Even if it's a one-page overview of what you're going to do with social media, lay out the strategy. What we see way too often is the social media strategy is, what am I going to talk about today? Okay, that sounds good. Let's get it out there. That's not a strategy. That's called winging it. And if you've got good instincts, winging it's okay. But we recommend that your strategy for social media and content dovetails with your clear and sustainable strategy on your website. And, if you're looking for something to write about social media as far as the very specifics, we always say look to what's happening at your office first. Look to what's happening with your customers and your clients, and look to what's happening in your segments. And every day, there's enough to talk about that you should be able to keep plenty of content going out. And then, of course, the strategy is going to be built around what is important for your users, what are they expecting from you, and how you get inside their head and understand, hey, these are the things that I need to know about. Well, develop that strategy and meet their needs through these social media outlets, and more importantly, have a plan in place before you start posting. And one other question, I'm sure listeners are thinking this, is, try to post weekly to social media. We don't recommend that anybody becomes a social media pest by posting too much.
So one of the other things too, though, is from a content marketing standpoint, is since most of the marketing departments are the ones that are going to be taking this on.
Yes.
So the marketing department is where it lives. However, most of the stories that happen within organizations happen outside of marketing. So some of the
sales team,
the sales team, engineering, R&D. I mean, there's so many stories to be told on so many different areas. The executive staff. It's time to kind of look out, where can you get these stories that would be of interest to your customers, to your clients?
Yeah, it's a great point. And this idea of, sales and marketing teams working together, or the whole company working together to drive this is so important. And there's websites. I think what the internet has done, it's made the world smaller. I mean, we've talked about this in our podcast. So all market segments are so much smaller now because we have access to everything. It's also forcing companies to think smaller. And I think that it's going to force these huge, large companies, for them to compete better, they've got to think smaller. And I think of a company like Apple, who is, one of the world's biggest companies, but how they function like a small little tiny company, really. Just a few key people and so forth. But that's really what I think is the answer, is you've got to have great teams that work well together and that can think small and close and disseminate this information, as opposed to, huge behemoths that don't talk to one another.
Well, we've got one last one. What is number 10, Tom?
Well, number 10 is kind of a takeoff on number 9, which is the idea that before you launch SEO or PPC or anything to do with the search engine,
which is pay-per-click.
Pay-per-click, that's right. And SEO is search engine optimization. But before you launch those programs, you want to do a lot of research. And I would do comprehensive keyword research and look at developing some very clear, measurable ROI prior to launch, especially with PPC. You can spend thousands of dollars on PPC and not see a return. So plan it out, research your keywords, set up some test programs, and do something that's measurable around SEO before you put a lot of money and time in it. So if you do these 10 things, then I think you're going to be ready to launch social media pretty quickly, and also extensive SEO and PPC.
Well, what are our key action items for our listeners today, Tom?
Well, we had 10 action items. They're very clear. But what I would like to see our listeners do is take these 10 action items and write a brief action plan for each one of them. Who's going to do what? How's this going to get done? And just keep in mind, a brief plan is better than no plan, even if you have 3 bullet points for each of these 10 items. And then always remember that social media and SEO are parts of the whole, and they don't stand alone in web marketing. And then to even take it one step further, web marketing is part of your whole strategy around sales and marketing for your company. And Glenn, as you mentioned, that includes talking to one another and understanding content dissemination and social media and how it's used. So I think if people do this overall strategy, I think you're in a good position to see good results from your website.
Well, thanks so much, Tom. Folks, thanks for joining us again for the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast, and be sure to join us for our next one coming up here, which will be the rules of website design and development.
This has been an Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. For more information and to see all the available podcasts and much more, visit intuitiveblog.com. If you have a website you'd like us to review or an issue you would like to see covered in future podcasts, email us at info@intuitivewebsites.com.